It's World Cup season and there's one issue getting a lot of attention.
Human rights in Qatar, and in particular workers' rights.
Qatar's migrant workers.
Workers' rights in particular.
Workers' rights. Labor conditions in Qatar.
Migrant workers.
Is there anything the West or Europe particularly can do?
But is this just a Qatar problem or a football problem? The sport itself is rife with workers' rights abuses, from the factories that make the jerseys, the shoes, the balls, to the international firms that design and build the stadiums. This is an industry with a lot to answer for. Let's take a look at the big picture. First, the kits. One of the most lucrative parts of the football business is the merchandise. What fan doesn't want to wear their team's jerseys as they cheer them on? But where do the 32 World Cup finalists get their t-shirts made? This week, the English team was in hot water. An investigation by the Daily Mirror found the team's World Cup uniform, which is sold for £115, is manufactured in Thailand, where workers are paid less than £1 an hour. This isn't new, by the way. In 2018, a Daily Telegraph report found the team's kit was previously made in Bangladesh, in a factory that pays workers 21 pence an hour. Both kits are made by Nike, which has been the official supplier for the Football Association since 2014 and shares their profits with them. Nike's also had a long and notorious history with accusations of profiting off worker exploitation and sweatshops. And although they've made repeated promises to rectify it, the industry they pioneered not only persists, but has become a blueprint for global clothing.
The model of the industry is set up to protect the brands. So the reason they can deny responsibility for the workers that actually make their profits possible is because they are not directly employed. So the brand will hire, in many cases, an agent or a middleman. Then they will hire a factory, and then sometimes there's subcontracting that goes further down and subcontracting again, and maybe even home workers stitching clothes. So the brand, in many cases, may not know where all of their products are actually made and who is making them under what conditions. And this lack of transparency is a huge issue that underpins so many other violations in the industry. It's there solely to protect the brand, because then the brand can say, oh, you've uncovered violations we didn't know. We will simply step away from that factory, or in some cases even that country, and we'll source somewhere else where the labor is maybe even cheaper and the labor laws are even laxer.
Its rival Adidas, the World Cup's official partner, isn't that much better. Last month, workers across 20 cities held protests against the German company, accusing them of large-scale wage theft at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Puchen, the factory that supplies both Nike and Adidas, fired dozens of union leaders in Myanmar after they organized worker strikes demanding their pay increases from $2.30 to $3.80 a day. Earlier this year, more than 16,000 workers went on strike after their annual bonuses were cut by nearly half. At this year's World Cup in Qatar, 20 out of the 32 teams competing have been decked out by either Nike or Adidas. And this is just the official merchandising for the teams. There's also a $1 billion market for replica jerseys that's even harder to reform, itself rife with accusations of child abuse, human trafficking, and worker exploitation, fueled by a demand for cheaper sports gear for those who can't afford to pay £115 for their team's colours. In fact, the emergence of this illegal market has only boosted the manufacturing demand for official ones, with football teams fighting the sale of replica uniforms by redesigning their kits every season. All of this mounts pressure on a system already reliant on underpaid factory workers with little means of demanding better wages and protection. Then there's the football itself. Every World Cup comes with its own flashy new design, one that kids all over the world will fawn over, show off to their friends, fall asleep with in anticipation of their country's next fixture. This one is Al-Rihla, this year's design, made to reflect Qatari culture. Its name means the journey, which is appropriate because it's come a long way. All the way from Pakistan, in fact, in the city of Sialkot, which manufactures 70% of the world's footballs. In the Adidas factories there, workers work 6-day weeks and make $2 an hour. They produce 65 million balls a year that are shipped and sold for anywhere up to $100 each. The ball manufacturing industry has been criticized for decades, and reports of child labor were rife in the industry as recently as 2010.
What is really vitally needed is legally binding agreements to hold brands to account. We're pressuring all brands, but Adidas at the minute, to sign the Pay Your Workers agreement, endorsed by over 260 organizations and trade unions globally. Brands need to ensure that the workers receive all the wages owed to them from the pandemic, because that's a huge issue. They establish a severance guarantee fund so that money goes into this fund, and any worker who loses their job, maybe their factory closes or they go bankrupt or for whatever reason, they get the severance that they are owed by law. So for example, Adidas paid 800 million just to sponsor the World Cup. Well, to ensure that all the workers in their supply chain would receive the severance owed to them by law, they would have to pay just 10 cents more per product.
Now let's talk about the stadiums. A lot has been said about Qatar's treatment of its foreign workers, who were forced to work in hot, grueling conditions with little legal protection. Anywhere between FIFA's estimate of 37 workers and Amnesty International's estimate of thousands died building the 8 stadiums over 12 years. The kafala system that employs these workers, and it's also in place in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Lebanon, denies them the right to travel freely, change jobs, or demand better accommodation. Jeffrey used to be a safety inspector working at Lusail Iconic Stadium, where the World Cup finals will be held on the 18th of December, which is coincidentally International Migrants Day. He says when he tried to raise concerns with his superiors and help other employees understand their rights, he was deported by Qatari authorities back to Kenya.
The prize money for the World Cup is $440 million or so, if I think. But what is in it for these migrant workers who have worked day and night to make this a success? If a worker complains, and these workers followed the due process in complaining, why would an employer run to the police and report this worker as a runaway? Before this worker even gets the first hearing, this worker is already deported.
Under pressure, Qatar has improved work conditions and provided better legal protections for migrants, but it continues to deny most of the deaths reported. But here's the thing, Qatari firms didn't build these stadiums alone. These stadiums were designed and built with the help of foreign construction companies. These included British firms Foster & Partners, Zaha Hadid Architects and Pattern Design, the Spanish Fenwick Iraberen Architects, and the American conglomerate AECOM, who also managed the construction of Al Waqra and Al Rayyan stadiums. Al Bayt Stadium was built with the help of 2 Italian firms, Cellini Impregilo Group and Cimolai. Lusail Iconic was also designed by Foster & Partners, and built in partnership with the China Railway Construction Corporation. There, project managers were accused of hiding workers during inspections.
I'm really glad this is coming out and people are more aware of the workers' rights violations, but I'm also very conscious of how it's being framed as more like an Arab issue or a Qatar-specific issue. But there's been little emphasis on the role of corporations in the West who are profiting from lax labor laws. If you're driving down the wages, if you're driving down the production costs, then obviously there's going to be corners cut.
FIFA's own president highlighted this earlier this month.
How many of these European or Western business companies who earn millions and millions from Qatar, how many of them have addressed migrant workers' rights? I have the answer to you. None of them. None of them, because any change in the legislation means less profit.
Of course, FIFA itself is far from innocent. The football monopoly has widely been accused of paving the way for these abuses in Qatar and refusing to remedy them in any real way. It's also not the first time. Workers' rights abuses have been widely documented in the lead up to the World Cups in South Africa, Brazil, and Russia, where more than 60 workers reportedly died during construction. In Brazil, an estimated 170,000 people were evicted from their homes to make way for the tournament.
FIFA has an awful lot of power in the context of the World Cup, and therefore you have responsibility. The workers who built the stadiums, who suffered greatly. There's also a connection between the workers who made the clothes, who suffer.
The World Cup is essentially like a representation of the global issue we have, where we're all unwillingly complicit in, whether it's the food we eat, the water we have, the clothes we buy. We're all unwillingly complicit in this system that we don't all agree with. So I think the best thing we can do is to challenge it and to speak out.
The World Cup is one of the most prestigious tournaments in the world, but it doesn't have to be also one of the tournaments which makes millions, if not thousands, of people suffer.
Every 4 years, the world forgets these issues the moment the first match kicks off. Every 4 years, FIFA brushes it off and says we should focus on the football. But the problem is the football. It's an industry that has fueled and excused the exploitation of the most vulnerable workers in the world. Now, Qatar's human rights violations must be challenged. Yes, but they aren't unique. This is a much bigger problem. It's a football problem. It's a sports problem. And it begs the question, Can we continue to celebrate this beautiful game with our passion, with our attention, and with our money, knowing the true cost of its ugly underbelly? Thank you very much for watching. Of course, there's still a lot more that we weren't able to cover here just in this short amount of time. This is a huge issue that goes into a lot of industries, not just sports and not just FIFA. But it's something that is an important conversation, and the World Cup is an opportunity to talk about it. Let us know in the comments below how you feel about this current conversation as it's happening and surrounding the World Cup. What have you decided to do? Are you watching and celebrating your team along with everyone else, or have you decided to boycott it for moral reasons? And we'll see you next time.